Thanks for tuning into this Excel video. The primary trick that we're going to look at today is demonstrated on the chart that you can see now. There is on the x-axis two labels. The first label is a week number. Second label is I guess it's an indication of which round you're in. So it's got in season week 20 versus the Lions away, or in season week 21 versus the Bears at home. So that extra label is on a separate line, and there's a little trick to being able to set that up. In the process of doing that, I'll also show a couple of other labeling tricks, and we'll build this little scroll chart that you can move one way or the other simply by either clicking inside the bar or using the arrows at either end, and so the chart will change. The second thing just to note before we get started is that we've got a slicer up the top, and you can either show training stress balance, which is the number at the bottom of the bars, or you can show the percentage change in load from last week. And so this isn't a pivot chart, but we're still going to be using a slicer, so I'll show you how I set that up. Now let's go across to our start file. So here we are, we've got 52 weeks of data starting from the 4th of January 2016. I've got two different types of label, one in column C and one in column D. I'm more used to column D. I work with Olympic sports where we have a tournament every couple of months, whereas professional teams tend to have week in, week out. So that's the type of label that you might use in column C for that. Whole bunch of pre-season weeks, then your in-season weeks, that's what IS stands for, and the opponent and whether it's home or away. Next to that, we've got total load. That's what we're going to be charting. We're going to put a TSB score in there, and let's do that now. We can put in a this week versus the previous 4, or we could do something different, and I'm also going to put the change in load from one week to the next in column H. Before I do any of that, I'm going to click inside any cell inside the table and click insert and table. Now it's successfully guessed the parameters, so I can click OK, and I'm going to give it a name immediately. TBL data, not very imaginative, but that doesn't matter. Now if we're going to be putting a score in TSB, then we need to decide what we're going to do. I'm going to include the current week in the 4 weeks to date. So total load from the row that I'm in divided by the average of the current week in the previous 3. You can do TSB in a few different ways, but let's see what happens when I do this. One of the unique features of tables is that when you enter a formula in a column, it assumes that you want it to be through the entire column. So as soon as you hit enter, it auto-populates. You can see the formatting's not quite right, and it hasn't quite picked up things correctly in week 1 because there's nothing previous, but nevertheless it's giving us a number and we can push on to the next part of our project. I'm just going to make sure that we get alignment consistent. Now the next thing I want to check is the change percentage, so I'm simply going to say current week minus the previous week, wrapped in brackets, divided by the previous week. We get an error in the top cell because there is no previous week, so I'm just going to fix that by putting if error at the front and a double quote at the end of the formula. All it does really is blank out that first cell, but an error protects things a little bit for the future. So we've got our data set now. What I want to try and create is a little workings area. I would normally do this somewhere else, but I'm going to do it in full view here so that we can use this as a really tight contained example. And to help simplify my formulas, I'm also going to put just a counter. So if I type 1 and 2 in the first two cells, Excel guesses that we're trying to increment. I want to have 10 values displayed on my chart at all times, and so this makes it quite easy. Bearing in mind that I want to have either a spinner button or a scroll bar, I need to have a cell somewhere, so I'm going to put it directly above. That is our index counter. So I'm going to call that 20 for now, and we can point our scroll bar to that cell later on. Let's get some data out of our table. Where do we want to look? TBL data. Let's use the week label to get us started. What row do we want to look in? I'm going to click on this cell and lock it with the F4 key. Now I'm going to add this value here. If I want to copy this, I need to use $sign in front of the J but not the 11. If I put a close bracket and hit enter, double click and send that down, and it's going to give us the 10 consecutive weeks, 21, 22, 23 and so on. If I change this to 10, that also changes. If I change it to 0, it should give us the first 10 weeks. So it's looking good. And if I copy this to the right and I go up into the formula bar and do some editing, our process of completing this workings table should be quite easy. I want total load. For this one I want TSB. For this one I want wellness. Send them down as well. Change this to a percentage, and we're pretty much ready to create our chart. I want to put the chart above the table, so I'm going to select all the way across from A to N in row 9. I'm going to shift everything down. Also going to make a little canvas for us to place our chart onto. If I select my total load, create a basic column chart and increase the size of it. Right click, select data, and let's put our labels in there. Also in select data I'm going to click add our wellness data. It initially will go onto the chart as an extra bar, and it's so small that we can't even see it. It is there, however. So if I right click and choose change series chart type, I'm going to put it as a line on the secondary axis, and suddenly we're in business. I'm going to tidy that up because we know that wellness is a scale of 1 to 10, and that's very important to get that right. So if we want it to be set on 0, we have to overtype the auto with an actual amount. Change the unit while I'm there to 2, and that's finished and ready to go. While I'm working on that right hand axis, just going to give it a title in case I forget later. Not going to worry about formatting the color of that line at the moment. Orange wouldn't be my choice, but it's fine to keep the vibe rolling along. And so what we talked about was adding a scroll bar, but also, crucially, adding the ability to have more than one label on the x-axis. At the moment it's just got one thing. It's got PS11, PS12 in Season 1 and so on. What if I want to have more than one? So I'm going to change what I've got here in this label workings area. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to put an ampersand. Instead of week label, I'm going to backspace it until it just says week, and then hit enter. Double click and send that down. Now that hasn't worked perfectly, and the reason for that is it's just created a new line when it's run out of space up on the chart. There is a trick that you can use that will force the second half of that argument to go onto a new line. Let's go up into the formula bar and have a go at this. If you type CHAR and then in brackets 10, then put another ampersand after it, what you'll find is that nothing happens in the cell itself. If we expanded this out, you'll still see it all smashed together. But as we double click and send that down, we can see the chart has completely updated and everything has moved down to a new line. So we've got the week and then the label underneath it. And I know you wouldn't want to do this, but let's just try going crazy and doing it a third time. This time, let's put the phase in there. Double click, send that down to all 10 weeks, and we can see we've got the whole lot in there. I'm just going to reduce that back down so that my chart fits on the screen a bit better. So we've got week number, a new line, week label, a new line, and a phase or a block. You're going to have all sorts of your own options for that, but nevertheless, that's how you can do it. So what is CHAR 10? What is CHAR 10? If I go out to the side here and just type 1, 2, and then 30, and then 40, and then 50. Let's see what it gives us. It gives us all sorts of different characters. And if we change this to 35, we change this to 55, change this to 78, you can see we get letters and numbers and weird symbols. That's what CHAR does. It just happens to be that CHAR 10 or character 10 is the return line. Carriage return means that it goes back to a new line. So that's how I've been able to create that special feature on the x-axis. There were a couple of other things that I wanted to include, so I'm going to quickly get onto them. First thing is to put a scroll bar on here. Creating a bit of space under the chart is my first task. Then I go to the developer tab. Let's insert a scroll bar. I'm going to draw the scroll bar the same dimensions as my chart. I'm going to right click on it and choose Format Control. This window comes up. We want our maximum value to be 42 because there's 52 weeks in a year and we're looking at 10 values in our table. We can have an incremental change of 1, page change of 10, and if we click on the Finder box associated with the cell link field, we need to select the one that we've already been using. It's currently got 10 in it. Click OK. Now, as I move the scroll bar along, our data is updating. And when you saw page change, that means if you click inside the bar, it changes by 10. So let's try that out. Change it to 17, 27, back to 17, and so on. So we've got that scroll bar working nicely. One thing I always like to do is hold down the control key and select both of them, the chart and the scroller, and then group them. That way they move together. Let's get axis titles and chart titles by using the Design tab. Just a really simple title. Don't want to waste time with that particular thing. And we've got things working quite nicely. One of the things that I want to look at is adding some data labels. So if I right click on these bars, I can choose add data labels. Nothing particularly complicated about that. But what if I wanted that number, rather than to show the load, to show TSB? If I right click on those labels and choose format data labels, we get this wizard come up, and one of the new options in Excel 2013 says value from cells. So if I tick that box, I get a little prompt that's asking me for a range. So I'm going to use this range here. And now if you look at those labels, it's got both the data itself and the TSB number. I'm going to get rid of the value and just leave the TSB number. What I'm also going to do is put it down at the bottom, just so it's not potentially overlapping with our wellness line. Now I did a little trick before where I had a little slicer, so let's have a crack at that. We might want to have either change percent or TSB showing on the chart. Just going to put a heading there called display. First option TSB, second option change. And if I select all three of them and insert a pivot table, put it on an existing worksheet just underneath it, and drag display down to rows. One more step, and that is with the pivot table selected, insert a slicer. There's only one thing you can choose. Make it 2 columns and put it up above the chart somewhere out of the way. So we want whichever of these two options is chosen to drive our chart. So over here where it says TSB, I'm simply going to say equals this. Now I'll put an if equation in here. And so we've already got that sorted. If TSB is selected, do that. Otherwise, give us change percent. Copy that all the way down, and let's see what happens if we use the slicer on the chart. So those labels are changing, showing either change from the previous week or TSB. So that's pretty interesting, may or may not be useful, but it's a nice trick to be aware of if you want to use it for a different reason. Last thing I want to have a look at is to add a custom label to this wellness line. First thing to do is add a label. And so that's giving us numbers. Don't like where they are, so I'm going to put them above the line. Bit more visible. Now you can see why I didn't put the TSB numbers up the top, because sometimes they overlap each other. Now what I want to show you is to format these labels in a special way. If I right click and choose format data labels, go down to number, and in category we can choose custom, and down here in the custom we can type something in here. Now if you Google custom number formats, you'll find some really wonderful resources about how to do this effectively. What does this little thing that I've pasted in here mean? It means that if there is a value less than 6, then make the font color red. If there is a value greater than 9, greater than or equal to 9, then make the font color black. And in all cases use one decimal place. That's what 0.0 equals. And what that is going to do is make all other values disappear except for that. So if I click add, close that little wizard, we can see now that we've only got 5.5, 5.8 and 10 showing. And if I scroll that down, we can see there's a few more labels appear. So it's only showing those labels when it's important to show it, either because wellness is sky high or it's not looking so good. Now, one important thing that I didn't mention about this slicer is that if you select both with the control key, it can only show one. So nothing really is going to change. So it's important to know that you could use a drop down box or an option button or a checkbox, but don't really like them that much. And now that Macs are able to use slicers, I think it's great to include slicers in your projects. Now you can do it without the fear that people will break the spreadsheet. So that's an Excel for Mac 2016 feature that's been added. So there we are, we've got some interesting features there. It's mainly about the labeling of charts. We've got 3 lines of data on this axis. We've got our values from a cell populating the labels of these columns. We've got custom formats on the labels of the line, a slicer and a scroll bar thrown in for dressing it up, and an interesting looking chart anyway, so hopefully there's something in there that might be of use for you. Normally I'd hide all these workings away on another sheet, but it's helpful to have it happening in front of your eyes here. If you're interested in tricks like this, then you might want to check out a few videos that I've got for sale on Vimeo. The links are in the description below this video, and a discount for you as well if you wanted to have a look. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you soon.